And we are live. Welcome everybody to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, August 4th. We are going to do the show a little bit different today. Of course, I'm your host, Adam Hernandez. I'm here with Dr. Nick, and we have our special guest, Miss Gracie Gomez. We're going to go ahead and do the interview portion first today and get to Miss Gracie because she is spending some time with family, some very important time. And so she has been gracious enough to still come on and do the interview. So we'll go ahead and let her start out the show, and then we'll go to the city updates afterwards. And welcome, Gracie.
Thank you.
And you've been involved in Lubbock politics for many years now. Could you talk a little bit about how you came into your role as chairwoman of the Lubbock County Democratic Party, and kind of what does that entail? What were your duties in that role?
Okay, well, my involvement in anything politics happened in November of 2016, as I'm sure many of us, as it happened for, I'm sure for many of us. I just woke up the next morning and I realized that even though my vote is important, my action and voice to get even more votes is even more important. So I started reaching out, hoping to find more Democrats, Lubbock area Democrats, and I did. I started a Lubbock Pantsuit group, thinking I'd have about 10 members, and it grew and it grew. And then in the early spring of the following year, I met and learned about a candidate that I felt I could really believe in and work very hard on behalf, Beto O'Rourke. And so I became involved in his campaign, and I walked miles and miles of Texas for him. I became one of the ambassadors, Beto ambassadors, which I was really proud of. It's a recognition of how hard many of us worked. And then he inspired me to run for office. And in Lubbock County, it's tough to run as a Democrat. You have to be, I've heard, a little bit crazy and a little bit brave, and I'll just claim both to a certain degree. But I ran for Justice of the Peace Precinct 4, and I lost against the Republican candidate. But the important thing is that the Democrats had a choice, and there was someone else on the ballot, and it wasn't just just someone that got the position. They actually had to work for it. So that was my involvement in politics. And then I was asked to run by some local Lubbock Democrats, Democratic leaders, to run for chair position, as our chair was vacating, so that he could run for office. And so I did, and I won by quite a bit. So here I am. Being party chair basically is the face of the local party, the face and the voice. I don't believe that any organization or party is any one person, regardless of who what the official capacity is in your serving. It's a group of people working together to make change, needed change, good change. And so I am privy to, meetings such as the election board and the election commission that people in the general public may not be, but that's a job in itself too, because of course I'm the lone voice, Democratic voice, and the lone person of color in some of these organizations, or some of these commissions. So it's been interesting, and it's been educational, learning the politics behind many of the decisions made in Lubbock. So it's quite a job.
Nick, do you have a question?
Yeah, so one thing I'm curious about, because of your involvement with the Democratic Party here in Lubbock, there's not too many of y'all in the city, and I'm curious, what do you think are things or misconceptions that Lubbock citizens have about the Democratic Party here, or what do you think are some of the sort of common misunderstandings that you encounter? Because while it isn't necessarily a majority of the city, it is a very prominent community that's heavily involved in community life and civic life and engagement. And so what do you think there's sort of a disconnect? Where do you think that is, or what do you think that's about?
Well, I think a lot of the perception behind Democrats, not just, obviously in Lubbock and in Texas, Lubbock is one of the most conservative areas due to it's one of the most evangelical, right-wing evangelical areas in the country, not just in the state. But some of the misconceptions that I think people have about the party is that we're un-American and socialist and communist, and when in reality, the Democratic Party has fought for many years for equality and justice for all equally across the board. And that is one of the things that I strongly advocate for. And as you mentioned, many of us are involved in the community in service work. And that is an example right there of what we exemplify and what we stand for, is making the world better, not just for a certain group, not just for a certain gender, not just for a certain segment of our population, but for all. And I don't understand how there's so much opposition to it, but there is. And it's based a lot of, I think, on the choice to believe the rhetoric and the misinformation about us. The choice, it's all a choice.
Yeah,
I've experienced it. I've experienced, the targeting because of the position I'm in, and because I am outspoken. Actually, being party chair has muzzled me, has muted me to a certain degree, because I have to represent the party in as dignified manner as I can. But so I have to keep my mouth shut many times. But we have to speak out against these misconceptions and this rhetoric. We have to.
Yeah. Something I've noticed as an independent voter, I'm not a member of either party, but one thing I have noticed that I do think is a little problematic is the misunderstanding around socialism and communism. I feel like that label just kind of gets thrown on Democrats a lot without a lot of understanding behind it. Having studied a lot of history in my lifetime, I can assure everybody out there that there's nothing in this country close to socialism or communism going on, nor would that happen anytime soon. If you look across the world, actually, communism has pretty much been put to bed. There's a few, nations that do that, or it's really it boils down to authoritarianism, and they just put the label of communism or socialism on it. Like, so for instance, in a lot of the countries in South America, they call themselves socialist countries, but even on that side, a lot of times it just ends up boiling down to authoritarianism. And so I'm always kind of, taken aback by that. And I do think that's problematic, because I just don't understand how there could be constructive discussions and working together if you have a perception of the other side that they're evil, basically, or that they're gonna, as we hear all the time, destroy the country or are destroying the country.
Right. And I've had those conversations, so I've, in community presentations that I give in Lubbock, and, some of them are related to economic development. And I remember one that was related to opportunity zones, which is very much so a private sector friendly development program. And I was talking about the benefits of it. And one of the attendees felt the need to ask during the Q&A session how I felt about the socialists taking over the country, and what we needed to do to fight back to prevent communism from coming back. And I have to reflect on that as the generation, the Berlin Wall fell in the year that I was born. I never experienced the Red Scare or that propaganda. And so when I try to think about, what it must have felt like to have spent your childhood doing nuclear fallout drills, hiding under your desk, however pointless that would have been from a nuclear explosion. But I just think about sort of the mass hazing effect that exists now because of that, where there's just so many folks who are just so prone to thinking that the Soviets are just around the corner, or something like that is just suddenly going to happen in America. And it just, there's this disconnect, I think, for younger generations, where there's just none of that, sort of sense of whether it be exposure to propaganda, or whether it be living through that period in history of mutually assured destruction, which I'm happy we no longer exist in that period. But I think it does color locally. I find it fascinating how much it colors conversations here.
Well, and I think it's been exploited by politicians. I think it's a red meat that has been thrown out to their base and constituents to scare them into voting against anything that they may not believe in, that they may not understand, that they don't know. I find it ironic that the very people who, to them, socialism is the government having control of everything and providing for everyone, right? Or, for the country. And yes, you see horrible examples of it in Venezuela, and that's the one I can think off my head that it's just gone wrong, of course. But those very same people are the ones who benefit from so many government services. We're not even near close. The US government is not even near close to becoming a socialist government. But yes, if we're going to pay taxes, then we need to be able to benefit from the services. But I do think it has been rhetoric that has been spewed by politicians in order to control the
right.
Their base.
And as much as folks in West Texas don't want to hear about government subsidies, Lubbock's economy our foundation is government subsidies, whether that be massive, essentially agricultural cotton subsidies, whether that be Texas Tech, which essentially is heavily subsidized through Stafford loans, right? Over 80% of our students are not coming from this region. They are coming in with Stafford loans, and that money is getting spent in our community, right? From essentially federal backed debt. And then Medicare, right? We're a retirement destination. We're essentially the healthcare mecca for this region. And again, all those payments, same thing with retirees, Social Security and Medicare are substantial, monthly on Social Security sort of injections of money into our economy here. We require, if not, the basic underpinnings of how we function out here, require that kind of government support, because we recognize the value of food, fuel, and fiber. And those things are, from a national standpoint, things that the federal government and the state of Texas believe are important. And so, there is a give and take there, but we do, that is essentially how our engine is fueled. Through those.
Obviously, it includes public services, our police department, our fire department, our infrastructure that keeps our streets drivable, our schools. If they're against any kind of government involvement, then they're against that, and you can't make them understand that when they're so indoctrinated in that rhetoric, in those lies and misinformation.
Yeah. Well, I know you got to get out of here, so we'll end with one more question. So the 2022 midterms are coming up. Also, some local elections are coming up. And I'm sure you all are gearing up for those things, and candidates will be announcing soon and all of this. So what do you think people should know about getting involved, the importance of it? What can you speak to that?
I can tell people this, and this, I can't underscore this enough. State elections, to me, in my opinion, are as important or even more than the general election. These state races determine who represents us in Washington, who who will get appointed to the Supreme Court. Many important decisions that affect us on a daily basis are made by these state offices, those in this state office. So, races like state senate, any state office, and for that matter, local offices, because it all spills over. Let's work on getting these positions filled with where the politics in Texas and in Lubbock are a little more equally balanced, where we all feel represented. That isn't happening right now. And look at the situation it is now, even with COVID. We've got another pending pandemic, another pending disaster that could affect this time. If they think that if they don't care about our seniors, who, according to one politician, were willing to make the sacrifice of their lives in their lives, then are they not going to care about the children that could potentially catch COVID and potentially die or have lifelong effects? And so, somehow that got politicized, again, to manipulate votes, to manipulate people to vote against something that they're, that they want out of power. I cannot emphasize enough to our local community, please vote. If you voted and you thought it was important to vote in the presidential election, make this as important or more. We've got to change the face of politics in Texas and in Lubbock, and it will change. Eventually it will change, but we may not be able to wait for eventually. With all the gerrymandering, with all the voter suppression that's, efforts that are being made and changes that are being made, it may take a lot longer. It may not be in my lifetime before these changes are made. We have a Texas Attorney General who is literally a criminal, and how the top position in a state, the top legal position in a state, can have that and still be in that position is beyond me. I don't understand. So we've got to make some changes. We've got to vote out. If nothing else, our votes are our voices, and with those, we can fire those who are not representing us, or we can hire those that we feel like would do a good job for us. And if they don't, then you know what? Vote us out. Any elected official who does not do their job and who is not working on behalf of the public, because to me, that's what a politician is. That is, we should go into office as public servants, and that isn't happening. That isn't happening, especially in Texas. There are too many special interest groups. There are too many too much dark money passing, bank accounts and pockets and in lining pockets. And we've got to get that out of politics if we're going to have fair representation. And there are people that I think really tried hard and came so close. Beto O'Rourke comes to mind. I think he has a servant's heart, a public servant's heart. But, areas like Lubbock and the surrounding South Plains area cost us that race. It's such an important race because, here we have Ted Cruz, who does not represent all Texas. So I can't emphasize enough, get involved. Your votes are important, but your voices can be worth 10, 15, 20 votes by talking to people. Call out injustices and inequality the way you two are working so hard. Get involved in boards and committees and organizations in Lubbock. I can't tell you how many I am on that I am the lone voice of dissent, but just calling out some suggestions or propositions that they make in outrage or dismay is enough to make that difference where it's not put before a vote. And I'll give you a little example. During COVID, we had an election board meeting where, of course, they're all Republicans. they suggested that we close down the Texas Tech poll locations for safety. You know, they don't believe in COVID and wearing masks and, you know, doing what we can to protect each other, but they suggested to close them down. I threw the biggest fit about that. And, you know, if we're honest, if they're honest, that isn't the reason they wanted to shut those down. Texas Tech students vote, I would say 75 to 80% Democratic. So why do you think they've targeted those polling locations? As it is, there's only two. I told them we ought to have another one at the stadium. It's that campus is too big. And then at a recent election commission meeting, which is, you know, it's a different board, it's a different committee, but it's an elections commission. They suggested to eliminate the position of election administrator. And if that happens, it goes under the county tax assessor collector's office. And like I pointed out to him on record, I don't know the outgoing, elections administrator's politics, and I don't know the one we're about to appoint. And that's exactly how this office should be run. They can have their politics, but no one, we should know them. And I looked at Ronnie Keister, the tax assessor collector, and I said, I know yours. Yours are crystal clear. I shouldn't know that. And no. And I looked at the judge and I said, no, we will not have that. I won't even entertain that. So that they thank goodness didn't put it to a vote. But what's scary is that if they had put it to a vote, I would have been outvoted. They would have had the county commissioners court in place to make those decisions, to have actually made that move. So it's so important for us to be involved in the community and serve on boards, voting boards that make very important decisions on behalf of all of Lubbock. So
yeah, well, thank you for all of your insight, and we will let you get back to your family and enjoy your time. And we will definitely have you on again for sure. So we will reach out for that.
I'll have some lipstick on. And guys, I can't thank you two enough and the groups that you work with for your voices, your intelligence, your drive to make some good changes. If I can help in any way other than this, I would be happy to. Put me to work. I do have a very busy schedule, but I will find a way to make some time to help in any way I can. Another thing that I need to touch on very quickly that is so important is voter registration. You know, voter registration, knocking on doors, getting deputized as a registrar, and it takes a Saturday morning of setting a table out at a United, and it's amazing how many people get registered to vote that by doing something that simple. Knocking on doors, you know, every event that we attend, set up a voter registration table. So anyway, that I've got so much more, but I know that our time is limited, and I want to thank you guys for the important work y'all are doing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Gracie Gomez, and we'll see you later, Gracie.
Yeah, take care.
And all right. Okay, so we will get into the weekly updates now.
Yeah, so, Adam, I want to start off with coming back to the fallout around the SEC and the University of Texas going into the SEC. So since the last time that we talked, the major developments that have really happened here, one is that the rapidly formed Senate Select Committee for the future of Texas football had their one essentially session, or their one hearing that's been scheduled, was on Monday. And in attendance at that event was our Texas Tech representatives, our president, as well as our athletic director, and similarly for Baylor and TCU, the other schools that were directly impacted by this change, because we're all in the Big 12 together. Now, the challenge that I had with this conversation and the dialogue was this committee and its existence, if we're being honest about it, is entirely because of West Texas. It's because of the West Texas voter. It's because of the influence of the West Texas voter that motivated Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick to essentially move forward with this select committee. Now, I think there's a lot of skepticism about the value of committees to begin with. They oftentimes are a diversionary tactic when real work is what needs to be done. And I was optimistic going into this meeting because of why it was created and because of the influence that we had and the clear indications of how impactful this decision is going to be on the city of Lubbock, on Texas Tech. Even though we are a state school, we're a public school, UT is a public school, a state school, there was essentially no communications about overall how would this impact Texas University, public universities, and the fallout that would occur from that. So that was one of the good outcomes of this meeting, was that was talked a lot about. I think everyone acknowledges that these are issues. The challenge, though, is like many of these committees, it wasn't just simply State Senator Charles Perry and Representative Burrows, which thankfully this is unprecedented in Texas legislative history. They allowed for House members to actually participate in this panel and to ask questions. Both of them did an admirable job for West Texas in the questions that they asked and how they pushed. But what I'll just say is that they were overwhelmingly outnumbered by individuals who were specifically had interest in promoting the Metroplex and economic benefits to the Metroplex. And then one very vocal senator who effectively was just simply there to pick a bone with the state of Texas around how the University of Houston has historically been treated, which I think is a valid argument and conversation to have. But effectively, the people with the real complaints got talked out of the room. And it was challenging to see that. I actually think that our president did just such an admirable and dignified job of describing not just the impact that this would have on Texas Tech, but issuing a statement saying that we will flourish, that we will thrive, irrespective, regardless of what the state does next, that the community out here is committed to thriving no matter what. And that is going to be our motivation going forward. And I think that was such a perfect, dignified response to what ended up being just simply an absolute circus, which oftentimes these committees, which mixed politics and football and economics all in sort of one very sort of, confusing batch. And so, the outcome of that meeting, I wouldn't necessarily say is sort of big things. I think a lot of the conversations going forward are going to happen behind the scenes and behind closed doors to try to figure out the way forward. I'm just thankful that it looks like West Texas has a seat at the table in some way now, hopefully. The other sort of big update that happened this week related to this issue is that the Big 12 commissioner has issued a statement saying that, well, it was confirmed by news that he had met on Tuesday, so just yesterday, had met with the commissioner of the Pac-12 to talk about the idea of a super conference formation. And many people within the entertainment and sports industry believe that this is something that could happen, which is, I think for a lot of folks out there, and when we're talking about the future of Texas football or Texas athletics in general, I think there's a lot of concerns about what will happen if the number of opportunities to perform or to compete at the collegiate level suddenly collapse in terms of those opportunities. It actually reminds me a little bit of the scandal that just happened in Europe, where some of the teams tried to break away. Strangely enough, was actually backed by financiers. It was a series of banks that were encouraging them to do this. And in this instance, a lot of people are pointing the finger at media companies as being sort of the predominant driver for why these consolidations are happening. So we're kind of getting caught up as a region in these kind of global, shifting national dynamics in sports. And I think for a lot of us here, the big concern is we don't want to get missed, right? Like what the meaningful conversations about economics in West Texas should not be lost as these conversations about athletics and team spirit and what schools are going to be fighting against each other and the new rivalries that'll be created. There is a very much so a dollars and cents aspect to our community. And, to me, it's one of those things we just have to make sure that voice is heard.
Yeah. as most folks know who know me, I'm not a big sports guy, but I am a big Lubbock guy. And I know instantly when you told me about the situation, even not knowing the details about how sports franchises work and things of this nature, I even knew that this was going to be bad. Um, I'm grateful that the Texas Tech president said those things, because I think that as a community, that's actually encouraging to me, because as a community, we should all take on that spirit because of this reason. And before I say what I'm going to say, I do want to say that I've visited the Metroplex many times. I've done business in the Metroplex for many years. I know a lot of great people there. I know it's a great place, but that is the Metroplex. Houston is Houston, San Antonio is San Antonio, Austin is Austin, and West Texas is West Texas. Yep. And we have been out here, if you really look at it, on our own the whole entire time, because we are looked at when it's convenient for other folks, and then when it's not so convenient, then we're marginalized, if you will. And so I think that what really needs to happen is it's great to maintain connections with the Metroplex and with other cities in Texas, but we've got to start really taking it upon ourselves to decide what are we going to do here in Lubbock, because this whole Dallas of the Plains thing is an issue to me. And let me tell you why. Lubbock, Texas is actually the capital of the Plains and has been that for a long, long time. There's a lot of things in the world that would not have happened had it not been for this region and the things that we produce and the different things that we're involved in here. And so I think that we should first and foremost realize that about ourselves and take pride in that. And then the next step is that we have to open up connectivity to the West. We have plenty to the east, to Dallas and everything else. If you fly out of our international airport or fly into our international airport, you have to fly through Dallas. That makes no sense. If you have an international airport, it should indeed be an international airport. And so there's two things that can happen here. One much more easier than the other. But I would like to put this out so that people can start rolling this around. If you have any comments, you can leave them in the comments section, or questions. Feel free to ask them. Feel free to send me hate mail if you don't like the idea. But there's two things we can do. The easiest one would be to open up flights from our airport to and from the West. We talked a little bit about that last time. There's something that the state can do that's called flight volume guarantees, which would be sort of like insurance for Lubbock for opening up those flights to where it's not, detrimental to the airport's finances, and then allows them the time to build up the demand and everything that needs to happen. So that's the easiest. The second thing is we should have a major highway that goes west from Lubbock. The major highway that comes through here stops here.
Right.
And that should not be the case. We could probably continue a highway out to the west and maybe connect it to I-20 or something. It's one of the other major highways down somewhere, in a westerly direction. It can be done. Now, that would be much harder. That would have to be through the federal level. There, of course, it would be state level, probably multiple states would need to be involved. But these are the kind of things that we need to start thinking about and taking on, because we can do them. Though they may take a long time, we can do these things, and we should do these things so that we can start to act like what we are, which is the capital of the Plains. That's what we are already. We don't have to become that. We just need to start acting like it and moving in the world like it. And I think that once we do that, no matter what goes on, we will thrive, and as we have. And so that's my spiel on that.
Yeah, no, and I love that. When I think about where is the opportunity for Lubbock and if we think of it as the capital of the Plains, that is a region. I think about it from where do people come from for healthcare? Health policy is my background. I think about healthcare a lot in that way. And it's about 1.2 million people come to Lubbock in our referral region. That means that we are the predominant place where they are sent to, regardless of where they're living. That has significant components of Eastern New Mexico, that even has components of Southern Colorado when it comes to specific kinds of neurological care that we provide here. And so when I think about how much we already are essentially providing these important and essential services to an area, a geography that is larger than most states. So our region, in terms of where we service healthcare just out of Lubbock, is larger than the state of South Carolina. And at some stage, we have to realize that everything is bigger in Texas, and it's even bigger in West Texas when we're talking about distances and when we're talking about the need for connectivity. And my hope is these conversations push us in that direction, both as a region, but then also make Austin aware of the fact that we need this kind of connectivity. If our region is going to thrive in the 21st century, we can't be a lamprey to the Metroplex. We have to be able to stand on our own. And that starts with connectivity and getting essentially more relationships, more partnerships, more connections to New Mexico, to Arizona, to Nevada, to Utah, to, as far as California. We need to find ways to make those inroads. And I do agree with President Skovanec that I think as a community, we are going to find our way through this process. Now, hopefully the state does right by us in that journey. But I do think that this is a community that's committed to this to the long haul and making this work and finding our way forward, even though we oftentimes don't get a whole lot of respect in our state.
Yeah. So another thing that has come up recently down at City Hall is the new budget talks.
Wow, yeah. So this was all this week. Well, actually, it's supposed to be even more than just what happened these past couple of days. There's supposed to be another session tomorrow, but the conversations or the lack of conversations by the city council and questions sort of on this have actually really condensed the budget session. So these are a very important time in Lubbock's annual cycle where the council effectively sets new priorities for the coming year around the budget. So we look at, kind of where we are, we look at growth, what things are necessary on the employment side, sort of things like that. So these conversations are very, very meaningful. They're very insightful. In fact, city staff went above and beyond this time around. I'm sure we'll share them, but the presentation materials that they gave to the council for these budget hearings is excellent. They include a lot of additional figures and graphs and visualizations that make it easier to understand what it is that they're talking about. So they've actually done a lot. This is really going above previous year expectations in their budgets and their budget presentations in terms of just the quality there. So I really want to compliment everybody. Great documents to look at. But at a top level, and this is what we'll talk about. So what has changed? What's changed in this budget? Very little. We're essentially keeping almost everything the same when it comes to sort of staffing, city sort of things like that. But some major changes. The first is pay increases. So it's an estimation that it's I believe it's around a 4% payroll increase for city employees is what they're looking at right now. And about a 10%, a little bit above a 10% increase for the police force. So those are sort of one of the sort of areas where there's a significant increase in financing in some way. One extra $1 million is going into street maintenance. So it's been 10 years, the past couple of years, they're going to boost that to 11, which is something that I think we would promote because we want to see dollars going into road repair and road maintenance. So that kind of shift. The one, I think, concerning element is around something called the fiscal impact analysis.
Yes.
And so in these conversations, the city staff had put $100,000 into the city budget for this upcoming year to finally finance the fiscal impact analysis, something that has been promised that the city council unanimously approved of that they would do as part of the implementation of the Lubbock 2040 plan. Now, what, 4 years, almost 4 years ago. Councilman Griffith requested that this item be taken up as part of discussion. And then during discussion said that he was concerned about the implications of this study and that there should be more conversations at the council level about what they should do and how they should, whether it should, essentially what type of study should be done. He didn't want to say that he didn't want this financed, but he essentially did by saying he wanted to figure out what other studies or what other study could be done or what could be more appropriate. And the reason he said that, and he gave this in his own words, is that he is concerned that the study, the implications of it, the city does not understand what its impact on the free market of Lubbock will be of doing this study, which is the first time I've ever heard somebody being concerned of transparency and data having an impact on the free market, because the free market operates on data and the necessity of having that information available. So it was a bit of a head scratcher for his justification as to why he doesn't want to see this. And Adam, I'm just sort of curious about your thoughts. Why do you think that this is a study that he would not be interested in, or why do you think it is that he's asking to put the brakes on financing this?
Yeah, the same reasons they gave us last year. So for just a refresher for everybody, last year during last year's budget talks, this was one of the things that we were pushing for pretty hard. We had several back and forths with council about this, and it was a similar talking point was brought up. They didn't say the free market part, but they did say we don't know the implications of this, or it could have what was the term? Unintended consequences.
Oh, yeah.
So let's just remind everybody what the analysis we're talking about is called a comprehensive fiscal impact analysis. That's a really long way to say that they're going to look and find out where in the city are tax dollars coming from and where are they going. That's pretty much the gist of it. Of course, there's a lot of technical stuff and there's a lot of study that goes into it, but that's the gist of what they're trying to get at here. So a question for all those who are listening out there, in your own house, in your own finances, would there ever be a time when you would say that you do not want to know where your money is coming from and where it's going? So let's just think about that for a second, okay? And then let's talk about the elephant in the room of why they would be against this. There are some in the development community who would probably not like to see this study done. There are some on the council who I'm sure it may be uncomfortable to have this study done, and let me explain. So one thing we do know for a fact that is also documented in Plan Lubbock 2040 is the use of the Gateway Fund when it was made. The Gateway Fund was made in 2004. In 2005, it began being used 2014. And then it began being used. No, excuse me, I had it right.
Yeah, you did.
Yes, it was created in 2004, began being used in 2005. So refresher on the Gateway Fund. The Gateway Fund was a fund that was created in 2004, and where the money comes from is when you pay your LP&L bill and others, but a big part of it is your LP&L bill. There's a fee included in those utilities called a franchise fee. And these are so that the companies can use right-of-ways and things of this nature. So there's a franchise fee that you pay with your LP&L bill and others. And so 40% of those franchise fees for the entire city, that means all 6 districts, pay into this fund, right? So to date, It's over what 150 million has been spent from the Gateway Fund from all 6 districts. So trigger warning here. The vast majority of that money, if not all, was spent in districts 4, 5, and 6. Those are 10-year notes. And so Milwaukee from 34th to 98th Street, which was the first project, is not paid off until 2025 by all districts. I will remind you. And then the others come thereafter, whenever their completion date was 10 years from that. So we're still paying for this. If you live in districts 1, 2, and 3, you have been paying for this debt for those roads in districts 4, 5, and 6 for this entire time. And so we know that for a fact. This is something, not only, again, was it in Plan Lubbock 2040, which is the land use plan adopted in 2018, but this was also something that we've consistently brought up to council so that they don't forget. So is that uncomfortable for some folks? Sure, I could see how that could be uncomfortable for some folks. But at the end of the day, I don't care, and we shouldn't care, because again, it's just smart policy to know where our money is coming from and where it is going. That doesn't mean when we get the data that the whole southwest part of the city is going to collapse and all of the developers are going to go bankrupt.
The free market is going to collapse.
And the free market's going to burn to the ground, and there's going to be anarchy and chaos. That is not what's going to happen. All that's going to happen is that we're going to know better where things are coming from and where they're going, so that everyone, including developers, can understand where it makes more sense to build things and what makes more sense to build. So for instance, we've been speaking, we have experts that we confer with at Lubbock Compact that deal with these issues directly. And so one thing that you will find in cities oftentimes when they do these studies is that if the where your taxes are coming from, where they were going, are not really what you would think they would be. So for instance, like a big box retailer like a Walgreens or a CVS or something like this could actually be bringing in less tax revenue than a mom and pop spot that's been there for 40 or 50 years.
Yep.
And so, you know, when it's a little bit of uncovering things, and it shows some issues which I believe could be a source of uncomfortability for some on the council. Now, if I was sitting on the council, I wouldn't mind that. At least we're finding out. It doesn't mean, oh, everybody on the council is horrible because we found out this data and, you know, we may have been doing things a little bit less efficiently, right? So you know, the argument just doesn't hold up. Now, as far as the free market thing, I'm just gonna be frank on that. And I know Councilman Griffith, we're cordial and all of that, but I think that's just a buzzword. I think that that's just a trigger word to get folks riled up about this, and it has absolutely nothing to do with that in the context that he's trying to use it. It just simply does not. If anything, it will tell the free market where it makes more sense to go. That's all it will say. And so he is the only dissenting voice at this moment. I fear that that's going to grow if we're not able to continue to have this conversation out there and have people truly understand what's going on.
And credit to Councilwoman Patterson Harris, who made a comment pushing back on Griffith's reluctance. Because Councilman Patterson Harris has been involved in this topic and has recognized the value of good stewardship and the city having a good understanding of, you know, what parts are paying, what parts receive, and where that money is going and where it's coming from. And so my hope is that they want to go to the Comprehensive Plan Oversight Committee, CPOC, and to ask them for their insights. So that committee is effectively the carriers of the 2040 plan. They're supposed to hold the city accountable for continuing to implement it. And so my hope is that when they see the recommendations coming from CPOC, that they'll continue with, as planned, with financing this study. But it was concerning on that piece. There's one other part I want to talk about on the budget. So we have our first specific capital allocations of the American Rescue Plan dollars, right? So this is the $56 million that Lubbock gets. We have multiple years to use it. We don't have to do it right now. It is supposed to be for kickstarting Lubbock's economy after COVID. It can be used for a lot of things. The focus so far that we've been promoting is on accountability of those dollars, not specific projects, but a process for making decisions. Unfortunately, the council has actually refused to allow for any kind of citizen input in this process. They're already making financing decisions. They will allow us to have a listening session sometime down the road, but apparently after they've already made the financing decisions that they're going to do. So of the 56 million, 22.4 already shows up in the budget for next year. And this is what it's going to be for. So remember, this is supposed to be for economic development to kickstart our economy as we get out of COVID time. We're going to use of the 22.4 million, so about half of the total of what we get, we're going to spend 8.4 million on a water tank, a water storage tank. We're going to spend 8.1 million on a public health facility. We're going to spend 3.1 million on 3 fire trucks. They're $1 million a piece. Didn't know that. And then we're going to spend 2.8 million on 52 new police vehicles in one go. So I'm not going to give a comment on the value of those projects, whether they make sense, whether those are the best use of these dollars. What I will say is that how discouraging it is that the council has already, without any public input at all, right? There's been zero opportunities. Adam would have been at these had there been any of them. There have been zero opportunities for public input on this conversation. And the city has already allocated essentially half of the 56 to projects that they already had to have financing for. So all the projects that are going to be financed through this were essentially projects these are just filling in gaps. This is nothing new. This is nothing to kickstart our economy out of COVID time. This is nothing for entrepreneurs. This is nothing for wage support for care workers, for healthcare workers, or for daycare providers. What could have been done, micro grants, none of this. This is for projects that the city council was already on the hook for finding dollars for paying for, and they essentially use the windfall, half of the windfall that we're about to receive, to plug in those gaps. So. Essentially, these dollars are supposed to be used to revitalize our economy coming out of COVID time. They will be used for, so far, none of that. They will essentially be used for business as usual plans that we had made before COVID even happened. So, Adam, we haven't chatted about this in a while, so you probably have some thoughts. On this, I've kind of laid out a couple things here.
Yeah, not a fan of it. I've been saying this. I just, it takes me back to what we were just talking about and the arguments that we often hear. They're quick to bring up free market. But I guess, democracy, which is the free market of the people.
Ideas and the people,
doesn't, I guess that's not the free market we're talking about. And I think it's just ridiculous. I think that it's shameful that they're doing it this way. This is something that doesn't happen all the time, clearly. Fortunately, we don't want to have a pandemic every 2 years or every year or something. And so this will probably never happen again in our lifetimes.
Right.
And instead of taking the opportunity of this once in a lifetime, quite possibly event to take a step towards including the people, which, by the way, is causing division in our community between the council and the people, because it's this constant game of, okay, we'll take your public comments so that we can check a box if we take your public comments at all, but we're just going to tell you what we're going to do. Yeah, nice comments. By the way, we're just going to tell you what we were going to tell you in the begin with. And again, yeah, we know that's business as usual. I think that this needs to change. Going back to our capital of the plains conversation, we're not going to be that if we continue to operate in this, let's call it what it is, good old boys type of system, because it's inefficient. It is inefficient to have a good old boy system. When you're a little one-horse town in the 1800s and you're out in the middle of nowhere by yourself, that works. But when you're a modern city in 2021 with nearly 300,000 people and growing, this is not efficient. It causes all sorts of issues, as we've seen with Citizens Tower, and the list goes on and on and on. These kind of decisions and this kind of practice leads to results we don't want, and that we're still dealing with. Look at Citizens Tower, for instance. The thing that the citizens overwhelmingly came out and said they do not want, you gave it to them, that told them they have to pay for it, us, that we have to pay for this, and then it was botched in such a way that now we're on the hook for this flooding situation. And it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And so not that it's going to matter, but yeah, my vote is that it should have been put to the people. It should have been a longer process, because there is no rush to spend these dollars.
Right.
Just so everybody knows, they have to have it earmarked by 2024, I believe. And I think they have to have it used by 2026.
Yep.
So we've got time for this. They could have spent a year taking public comment and talking to stakeholders throughout the community and seeing where we could have really used this to boost our economy. And we make these bad decisions, and then we wonder why we have to go and beg the Metroplex for something, or beg UT and OU to not leave the SEC, or to not go to the SEC. And so it's that's my thoughts on it, and just not happy about it at all.
Yeah, and that's, that was sort of the big conversation for this week. The other piece here is that the council did decide to move forward unanimously with a $174 million bond election in November. That is going to happen. There was a brief conversation about the structure of the vote, but ultimately the council all came to the conclusion that this is something they would vote for. And so it will be an up or down vote on a large package of road projects across the city of Lubbock, although District 3 only has one, so that they are actually getting the least out of this bond election. But as a series of projects, $174 million. We haven't had a bond election since 2009. A city our size likely needs to be doing these once every 5 to 6 years maximum. We've gone way longer than that. So this is super overdue. It's something that we absolutely need to get on the books and to make sure that we're keeping track of and keeping on pace with all the roadway building as well as reconstruction and redevelopment that is necessary in our community, because our roads and our road liabilities are absolutely massive for a city our size. So those are sort of it for the news updates of this week. Yeah, and we are at the end, but I will talk about some events that happened yesterday. We had several neighborhood night outs. There was 2 in East Lubbock. There was one at the Patterson Library
that went very well. Very good attendance. They had Coco Melon, for those of you who know who that is. You may want to ask your kids if you don't know who that is. Was out there taking pictures. LPD has quite a bit of mounted police, I found out, because they had mounted police at all of these,
Wow.
like several at each one. And so it's good to know we have plenty of mounted police. The fire department was out at these. A lot of different resources were out there. Just good stuff all around. The next one was, or there was actually two happening at the same time, was at May Simmons with the Dunbar Manhattan Heights neighborhood. That one was also very well attended. A lot of stuff going on out there. They had hula hoop contests going on. A lot of the Estacado cheerleader team was out there. The principal from Estacado was out there. There was a lot of great guests out there. And then there was the other was at Maggie Trejo Super Center in North Lubbock. And this was put together by the North Lubbock Neighborhood Association. And very, very big turnout. I arrived a little late to this one. It started at 7. I arrived about 8. And at 8 o'clock, there was still, in my estimation, a good 500 people at the park.
Wow.
It was a big crowd, big crowd. Of course, it thinned out as the night went on, but it was a huge crowd, very good turnout.
That's exciting. Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah, overall went really well. And with that, I will take the opportunity to remind everyone to join your neighborhood associations. This is going to be very important moving forward. I'm going to just encourage everybody to do that every time. So if you don't have a neighborhood association in your neighborhood, for whatever reason, you can start those. And so if you need any help with that, you can contact Lubbock Compact and we can let you know what that looks like. So as we go out, I will give a shout out to a huge East Lubbock event that's going to be happening August 14th. This is the Eastside Family Reunion Back to School Fun Fest. And this is going to be a huge event. It's going to start at 9 a.m. with the parade, very large parade. We have a lot of participants already registered for this parade. It's going to start at Estacado High School. It's going to go down MLK to May Simmons. Now, at May Simmons, we have both community centers, the community center and the senior center. In those two buildings, there will be, and out in the park, some of them will be outside, but between those three locations, there will be upwards of 40 resource tables at the resource fair that's going to be happening there. We're also going to be, our goal was 1,000 backpacks, to give away 1,000 backpacks stuffed with school supplies. We are at well over 1,000. So we'll be handing out well over 1,000 backpacks stuffed with school supplies for all grade levels. There's going to be the COVID wagon at the new patrol division that's right across the street from the community centers. And the COVID wagon will be there. They will not only be doing vaccinations, they will also be doing immunizations. So if your kids need to get caught up on immunizations, they will be doing those as well. And so great service there. They will also be giving, LPD will be giving tours of the patrol division, so people can look through there, see what it looks like. They're going to have their recruiters out there if anybody's interested in joining law enforcement. And just FYI for everybody, because the question has been asked before, there is no jail inside of the patrol division. So it's basically an office building that the officers will be working at. Pretty much they'll just be using the detention center as the jail for anybody that. So you're not going to be walking through like a prison or anything like that. So just wanted to put that out there. So LPD has been very gracious with this event. So the fire department will also be out there with the fire truck for kids to look at that. And so some of the events we're going to be having going on in the park is senior bingo, a spades tournament, dominoes tournament, obstacle course, open court basketball will be going on. there will not just be a bounce house, there will be a bounce world at a Rock Solid Fitness parking lot. There will also be tons of free food in the Rock Solid Fitness parking lot. At last check, we had about 800 plus pounds of meat and counting. So there will be plenty of free food. It's all free, an entirely free event. There will also be a recognition and award ceremony, and then it will end off with praise in the park. And so it's just going to be a huge event, open to all family and friends of East Lubbock. So it's open to everybody. We would like to see everybody out there to just be unified and come out for fellowship and food and music, and to get your kids ready for school. Oh, almost forgot. A big part of this as well. And this will be taking place in several different barbershops and hair salons. And I'll get that information out to everybody in the coming days. But from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. that morning, they're giving out free haircuts and hair services for the girls and free haircuts for the boys from 6 to 9 at several barbershops and salons. So we'll have those for you. So just a great event to get the kids ready for school and to come out and be with the community.
Wow.
So great stuff going on. That again is August 14th. And it will be from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at May Simmons. And so that's it for our show.
Yeah.
And of course, you can follow us on Lubbock Compact, like us on, subscribe on YouTube, or you can go to lubbockcompact.com if you would like to get involved or follow our work there or donate, of course. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Good night.